Good evening, everybody. I don't think I was quite prepared for Diane's lovely words and introduction, so I can't tell you what an extreme honor it is to be up here today in front of this audience. You know, I'm truly humbled to be standing in front of so many true warriors in the cause of ending gender-based violence. It is, truly inspiring to be here because of the journey that we as a family embarked on a little bit over 4.5 years ago. But, Diane, quite lovely mentioned moms, and because of that, I have to acknowledge my mom, who's here this evening. And what I think is behind any good man is an incredible array of remarkably strong women, because I know that was certainly the case for me growing up. My mother is Japanese. She probably won't like me to say her age, but she came to the U.S. for university about 70 years ago from Japan. And as some of you might be aware, Japan is a very patriarch-driven society. And her mother came to boarding school and to university here in the U.S. A little bit over 100 years ago. So both my grandmother and my mom were very uniquely strong women who went from Japan to the U.S. to seek an education and to find a place where they could be themselves and express themselves. My mom raised a household of incredibly strong women. My sisters are both very strong, and they've raised strong children. I've met my beautiful wife, Susan, who I think we clicked because I was very comfortable with a very strong person, and my wife is extremely strong. And I've been blessed with three remarkable daughters that have been sort of the joy of my life. And I feel woefully exposed standing up here today, being unqualified to be up here talking to you, especially compared to my other honorees here who've done remarkable work. For me, I'm just a father. I'm just a dad who loves his family. And, it was interesting, about 4.5 years ago, we were ending up, we had lived in Japan for about 12 years, and I have 3 daughters. We raised our daughters in Japan. And I found it quite remarkable that just like my grandmother and my mother, I was facing a scenario of my kids who were raised in Japan who were going to be moving to the U.S. for their education. And I thought, boy, isn't that sort of quite interesting considering, our background. But little did I know what I was sending them to. We've heard stories about what exists in other cultures around the world and the improvements that need to happen. But here at home, we are facing also incredible issues and problems when it comes to gender-based violence. And we need change. 4.5 years ago, a month before my oldest daughter's graduation from St. Paul's School, I had 2 daughters there at the school. My oldest, Lucy, was a senior, and she was graduating. My daughter number 2, Chessie, was a freshman at St. Paul's. And a month before going off to my daughter's graduation, I read an article in the New York Times about the statistics of girls in universities in the U.S. And I read the statistic, and I turned to a colleague of mine in the office in Hong Kong, and I said, the stats say 1 in 4 girls will be assaulted before they graduate university. And I turned to him and said, I have 3 daughters. Statistically, this is likely to happen to me. And 1 month later, it wasn't my 18-year-old who was heading off to university that was a victim of sexual assault. It was my 15-year-old daughter who was a freshman in high school. So this was a tremendous wake-up call for me. And it's really burnt into my brain 3 words that now drive the life of my wife and I as we look at the world. It's listen, learn, and act. Because after my daughter was assaulted, she did do the right thing. She spoke up. And we expected the right things to happen. But unfortunately, what we learned was there is no playbook, there is no roadmap for victims of sexual assault. It's an absolute tragedy in our society that this crime happens at such incredible frequency. But for me, what I learned through this experience was the real tragedy here, which in my view is a controllable. It's what I call the secondary victimization that every victim of sexual assault faces. We've learned from talking to countless victims over the last 4 years that every victim faces the same scenario after they're assaulted. So not only do they have to face the trauma of sexual assault, but they need to face the trauma of being isolated, of being silenced, of not being believed, of feeling like they have no voice and no control. And this is done by the victim's community, by their peers, sometimes even by their families. And if you choose to do the right thing, as my daughter did, she reported the crime and entered the criminal justice system. We also learned how that is turned against a victim. My daughter was accused of ruining this young man's life. And she was referred to as bringing the charges against this young man, and we needed to explain to people it's the state of New Hampshire which is bringing the charges, not my daughter. My daughter is a witness for the prosecution. But we also learned the importance of words through the process. My daughter was referred to as the alleged victim, as the accuser. And I don't think there's any other crime where someone is a victim of a crime and then is labeled as an accuser, as the alleged victim. If you have your car stolen, that doesn't happen to you. And think about how that marginalizes somebody, how it makes them feel within their community. So my wife and I, early in the process, we said our only focus and dedication is to look after the welfare of our daughter and to make sure that this young man doesn't do it to anyone else and he's held accountable for his crime. Because this was the motivation of Chessie for reporting the crime. Now, unfortunately, we faced then the aftermath of the community turning on my daughter. But at the time, I had no idea that there was a history of 70 years of sexual abuse at St. Paul's School. The school that I graduated from in 1982. The school that I selected for my daughters to attend because I wanted them to have a safe haven, a safe landing place after our overseas assignment in the US. So this is where I learned another important concept when it comes to sexual assault. It is institutional complicity. Now, as you might gather by now, I'm not a fun person to meet at a cocktail party. Because for very long time, I might get a glass of water, please. For 4 years, we faced what victims and their family face, and we made a vow that, the perpetrators have well-established playbooks. They have a lot of resources to go to. They have a roadmap that they can refer to that's very well practiced and very much improved, assault after assault. And victims don't. So my wife and I said through the process, if we get through it, and each day we were questioning, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? If we get through it, we're going to do what Chessie did. Chessie reported the crime because she had heard this young man had assaulted 4 other girls before her, and none had reported. So she felt it on her shoulders to speak up. And my wife and I said, we cannot allow another family to go through what we went through. We need to kick the can down the road, and we need to make sure that we build improvements into the system so victims and their families can get the kind of improvements that the perpetrators get through each case and each evolution and cycle. So fortunately, through the help of many miraculous occurrences over the last 4 years, at our darkest hours, we always had someone come out from nowhere and offer us the kind of support, words and support that we needed. And that helped us get through the process. And many of those people are sitting at the 2 tables down there to the right. So it shifted to now, as I said, people tend to walk away from me now at cocktail parties because I find it very important, person by person, to start speaking up on this topic. The silence is pervasive. This is an uncomfortable topic. People don't want to speak about it. But the statistics say everybody in this room knows a victim of sexual assault. And please think about that. Every single person here knows a victim of sexual assault. And if you don't realize it, it's because that person, could be a relative, a friend, a peer, doesn't feel safe or supported enough to speak up and explain their pain. And this is a tragedy that needs to end. And this is something that I view that is controllable within our lifetime, is, again, listen, learn, and act, is for us to listen to survivors, believe them, and support them. You know, learn about this topic. Learn about how pervasive it is. Learn about what victims go through. And think, you know, can we create empathy in our heart for these victims of a horrible crime? And then can we be brave enough to take action? And that's sort of the key thing now. And one of the reasons that I'm so grateful to Elise and Alvin and Vital Voices for giving me the opportunity to chair the Solidarity Council and trying to activate men to get more engaged in this topic. It is encouraging to see the number of men in the audience today, but we are woefully behind what we need to be doing, because this is not a woman's problem. I find it very interesting when people talk about gender topics, the assumption is that this is a woman's issue. You know, it is not a woman's issue, it is a men's issue. You know, I'm incredibly frustrated that the Me Too movement and that term has been now, you know, twisted to hearing in the corporate space where I reside. I'm in, as you can tell, in finance. That I attended a speech given by a law firm in Tokyo several months ago, and the topic was Me Too in the corporate America. And I went to attend, thinking I would learn something new. It was by a law firm, Fishing for Business, and the opening line was, you know, there's been a hysterical overreaction to Me Too in the United States. And I sort of sat there saying, you know, I bit my lip and waited for the Q&A to sort of raise several topics with the gentleman. But, you know, it was an eye-opening experience to me. And I find it offensive that the Me Too, to me, Me Too is a term that's meant to mean community for survivors of sexual assault. It is meant to express comradeship with someone who's been through a horrible act and to let them know there is a community out there that will believe you and support you. To hear it mentioned in the corporate space, I think we need to shift the words. Again, words are important. You know, Me Too represents rape, and we need to end rape happening by men on women. And this will be, I think, one of our focuses in 2019 is how do we create a safe and supportive environment, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the schools, or whether it's at home. And that's going to start by listening, learning, and then taking action. So, again, I'm very humbled, you know, by this, you know, opportunity to speak to this wonderful, you know, audience tonight. And Vital Voices to me has a very treasured, you know, meaning because of all the silence that we as a family faced for several years. And it is time for us all to raise our voices, men included, in solidarity against injustice, bias, violence, harassment. It is time for not just words, but also action. Thank you very much.